Welcome to the deep dive. You know the drill. We take a stack of sources, research notes, and some of the wildest business stories we can find, and we pull out the absolute most important knowledge you need to be well informed and fast. Today, we are focusing on a success story it's really defined by geometry and sheer tenacity. It's the journey of Rosario Kim, who took the idea of the square watermelon and turned it from basically a joke into an incredibly lucrative niche market. So our mission today is a true deep dive into innovation strategy. We're going to trace the entire path of this concept, from being dismissed as just quaint to becoming a serious, scalable enterprise. We want to find those surprising turns, the painful failures, and the crucial insights that make this story repeatable for any innovator out there.
What's fascinating here is that we often look for innovation in, complex tech or finance. But this story, which we pulled from the My Dumbest Success podcast, it really proves that the highest leverage points can be found in the mundane.
Like produce logistics.
Exactly. Like produce logistics. We're exploring how Rosario Kim used critical thinking and, frankly, immense persistence to validate an idea that literally no one was asking for. The learner is always looking for those aha moments. And, understanding the financial side of this shape change is definitely one of them.
Absolutely. So let's start right at the beginning, at the genesis of the idea. This wasn't some marketing stunt born in a boardroom. Where did this geometric fruit obsession even begin? What was the seed of this quirky idea?
Well, Rosario detailed the moment of inspiration pretty clearly. It happened during a visit to a friend's farm over in Japan. They were having a discussion about, oddly shaped fruits and vegetables while bouncing around on a really bumpy cart ride through a greenhouse.
That actually makes perfect sense. A bumpy cart ride through rows of produce is probably the perfect place to start thinking about things that don't, roll away.
Precisely. And the genius of the cubic shape, it wasn't just about novelty. It addressed a serious logistical and economic pain point that the produce industry has always faced.
Round fruit is inefficient fruit.
It is. Think about global shipping. The void space in a container ship, or even just on a pallet filled with spheres, is enormous.
All that empty air.
Exactly. Cubes, on the other hand, they stack, they store efficiently, it reduces shipping costs, it minimizes breakage.
So this was dual purpose from the jump. You have the practicality for storage and then the inherent aesthetic appeal. Rosario wasn't just creating a novelty item. They were actually tackling a supply chain problem with, simple geometry. But when Rosario shared this idea back home, I'm guessing the reaction was less about supply chain efficiency and more about, absurdity.
That's right. The first hurdle wasn't agricultural at all. It was psychological and social. When Rosario mentioned the idea at a family gathering, it was immediately met with chuckles. Instant dismissal.
What was the phrase they used?
The specific feedback was, how quaint. It was treated like this charming but completely impractical flight of fancy.
Okay, let's unpack this because, wow, that must sting, especially when you feel like you've unlocked a genuinely clever secret about efficiency. How did that initial personal ridicule compare to the professional resistance that came next?
The professional skepticism was, I'd say, far more dangerous because it was based on established financial models. You had seasoned market experts questioning the fundamental logic. They'd say, why tamper with perfection?
Right.
They saw the novelty as a temporary, very costly distraction that would just dilute a classic product. This wasn't ridicule, it was pure risk aversion. They saw the R&D costs, the specialized farming equipment, and just said, it's an unacceptable margin erosion for a product that already works just fine.
That's a huge difference. You've got financial analysis saying your idea is bankrupting on one hand versus your cousin laughing at you over dinner on the other, but that psychological hurdle must still have been massive for Rosario.
Oh, it was. Rosario admitted that self-doubt really gnawed at them. The fear wasn't just about losing money. It was the intense pressure of being publicly wrong, of becoming, and I'm quoting here, the butt of a produce joke.
Oof.
Yeah. And this raises an important question. How do innovators push past that public fear, that internal self-doubt, when the financial experts and even your own support network are telling you to just quit? Rosario had to build a level of conviction that just went beyond external validation, focusing purely on the logic of the geometric advantage.
And that internal drive won out because despite all the jokes and the professional skepticism, the idea turned into an obsession, and it started just 2 days after that family gathering. So let's get into the messy details of failure. What were the first, clumsy, and very resource-straining steps they took?
Well, like a lot of innovators working without capital, Rosario started by improvising. with very limited resources. The initial molds they used were basically simple scrap metal.
Scrap metal.
Yep. And this choice, while it was resourceful, it led directly to a major learning curve and some serious financial losses.
Scrap metal molds. I can just imagine the quality control nightmare that must have created. Walk us through that failure. What went wrong technically?
The first batch was pretty predictably a disaster. The result was just deformed watermelons that weren't marketable.
So not just square, but like mangled.
Exactly. It wasn't just the shape, it was the quality of the fruit itself. Rosario found out that the scrap metal molds, which were fixed, not flexible, they created these uneven pressure points. And this pressure disrupted the internal growth structure, which led to, inconsistent flesh density and just poor flavor. And on top of that, metal conducts heat differently than plastics or glass, which create these little microclimates inside the mold that really stress the plant.
So it wasn't just geometry, it was thermodynamics and botany. The failure wasn't because the idea was wrong, but the execution was just primitive.
It's exactly right. And each failed batch drained significant time and the very limited financial resources they had. But the organizational setback was even worse. The initial partnering growers, who were already pretty risk-averse, they retreated immediately.
They just walked away.
They walked. They correctly saw that the technical failures meant the investment timeline was going to be way longer, and the potential for standardization, which is crucial for farming, was just too low.
That's such a crucial point. It really reinforces that early-stage failure isn't just a financial hit. It's an emotional and a social drain, too.
Rosario described each failed watermelon as a personal failure that just continuously tested their optimism. When your partners walk away, the pressure to keep the faith must be crushing.
Absolutely.
It really tests your resolve. You're left with a concept, a pile of deformed fruit, and the knowledge that your early partners have lost all faith. The next stage of development, which was critical, involved iterating on the mold design, moving away from those fixed scrap metal forms to precision-engineered, reusable molds that allowed for gradual pressure and temperature regulation.
But that transition cost money they just didn't have, so they had to keep bootstrapping.
Okay, that background on the struggle is so essential because now we can really appreciate the turning point. Here's where it gets really interesting. What stopped the resource drain and started the momentum?
The momentum shift came from stepping outside the traditional agricultural market entirely. The crucial event was a chance meeting at a small industry conference. It was with a boutique grocery retailer.
Rosario, hesitantly presented the square melon, fully expecting the usual chuckle and dismissal.
But the retailer saw the cubic shape not as a logistical solution for the masses, but as something else entirely.
Precisely. They didn't laugh. To Rosario's immense surprise, they loved the novelty. They weren't interested in replacing round melons in the bulk bin at all. They saw the square watermelon as an ideal centerpiece for showcasing in their upscale stores.
So they saw it as edible art.
Yes, edible art.
That's the market shift. This is the definition of finding your blue ocean, right? Yeah. They moved the product from the super competitive mass commodity market to the low competition, high margin luxury artifact market. That completely changes the economics.
It does. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really shows the power of identifying the right early adopter. The high-end boutique market could sustain the higher labor costs that come with growing fruit and molds. They were buying value, not volume.
Right.
And the retailer's endorsement, that provided validation, it fueled confidence, and crucially, their feedback led to vital enhancements.
Like what kind of enhancements?
For instance, they emphasized the need for perfect, vibrant coloring and consistency. They even suggested minor size adjustments just for display purposes.
So the retailer's feedback is what turned the commodity into a true luxury good by demanding aesthetic perfection. That validation completely changed the game.
So how did the actual growth start? Was it a slow build through that one retailer, or was there an inflection point?
It wasn't slow. Once it was positioned as this high-end specialty item, demand skyrocketed unexpectedly, and that happened after a viral feature appeared on a really prominent food blog.
The food blog effect.
Yes. And suddenly, the curiosity that had initially fueled all that ridicule, it translated into massive public interest and consumption. Viral food blogs are an incredible accelerator, but they're also fickle. That exposure opened up huge opportunities, but I have to imagine it was chaotic to manage.
It was an immediate surge of both opportunity and immense pressure. The growth examples show the versatility of the product in this new niche. Upscale cafes began featuring them as unique centerpieces. High-end catering companies started ordering them specifically to impress guests at events. But managing this required rapid, effective scaling. Rosario had to transition immediately from sourcing locally and kind of haphazardly to establishing sustainable scaling.
Sustainable scaling in agriculture sounds like a logistical nightmare when demand just explodes overnight. What specific problems came up from having to work with various farms to meet these new orders?
Well, complexity just exploded. First, quality control became paramount. Ensuring that dozens of different farms, maybe in different climates, were all adhering to the precise standards of the custom molding process was extremely difficult.
Right. You have to standardize everything.
Everything, soil nutrients, irrigation schedules, and most importantly, the mold placement and removal processes. Secondly, cash flow got really tight.
Because farming is slow, but viral success is fast.
You got it. They were investing heavily in expensive, specialized, reusable plastic molds and securing contracts with new growers long before they ever saw revenue from the harvested fruit.
That operational stress must have carried a huge emotional toll, right? You're finally meeting success, but you're also dealing with this enormous pressure that can interrupt everything else in your life.
That's absolutely right. Rosario noted that despite the outward success, the journey was fraught with uncertainties.
Mm-hmm.
They admitted they considered giving up more times than I can count. The pressure to deliver high quality under that immense scale, it often interrupted personal relationships. The time required for farm visits, quality checks, contract negotiations. It left little room for anything else.
So what kept the conviction alive during those moments of near burnout?
It was the small, specific wins that countered the overwhelming stress of scaling. Rosario highlighted how important it was to get these supportive, insightful emails from intrigued chefs who really appreciated the effort and the aesthetic value. These small successes, these little moments of genuine admiration from the target consumer, they were crucial. They breathed life back into the resolve and proved the struggle was worthwhile.
That focus on the positive feedback loop is such a great lesson. So looking back at the entire journey, from that bumpy cart ride to the viral feature and the scaling chaos, what are Rosario Kim's key pieces of advice for the next generation of innovators?
Rosario offered two main pieces of strategic advice, and they connect directly to that psychological journey we talked about. The crucial insight is to embrace what seems far-fetched. If an idea excites and maybe even embarrasses you, you're likely onto something. That initial feeling of absurdity often signals that you've found something original, precisely because it hasn't been rationalized out of existence by traditional thinking.
It sounds like the embarrassment is the market filter. If the established players aren't doing it and they think it's ridiculous, you might have a massive differentiator on your hands. What about the more practical wisdom?
The practical wisdom is all about your team and your environment. Innovators must stay curious and consciously surround yourself with people who challenge and encourage you in equal measure.
The critics and the cheerleaders.
Exactly. You need the critics to help you find the technical flaws, like the scrap metal mold problem, but you also need the enthusiastic early adopters, like that boutique retailer, to show you the niche market you should be targeting. So what does this all mean? This square watermelon, it just reinforces the idea that true innovation can emerge from the most unconventional places, especially when you reframe a product from a simple commodity into an artifact.
Rosario Kim's story really is the ultimate playbook for modern niche strategy. It's validation that if the world calls your idea quaint, you shouldn't just discard it. You should analyze why they find it quaint, iterate on the flaws, and then go find the luxury market that's willing to pay a premium for that disruption. The transformation from a simple chuckle to a successful, scalable enterprise shows us that sometimes you have to dare to craft the atypically brilliant, even if the concept seems fundamentally square.
And this raises an important question for you, the listener, to mull over. Consider how many truly successful innovations, from the early automobile to the first commercial flight, were initially dismissed or met with ridicule simply because they didn't fit the existing mold, or because they served a luxury niche before they ever became accessible. What unique, slightly absurd idea you might be dismissing right now because it just seems too square for the traditional market?
That's a fantastic provocation. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into geometric fruit, luxury economics, and entrepreneurial persistence. Until next time, keep dreaming big and keep exploring new knowledge.